I'll call to order the special meeting for the City of East Grand Forks for December 5th, 2023. It's now 5 o'clock. Would City Clerk please call roll?
Mayor C. Gander.
Here.
Council President Olson.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Nicol.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Better. Here. Ben Markovinsky.
Present.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Brian Larson.
Here.
Karen Peterson. Here.
Does it? A flashback there. Does term a quorum. Number one, discussion on 2024 budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. Circling back to the discussions at last week's meeting and a few of the open-ended items that we wanted to try to focus a little bit more time on as it relates to the 2024 budget. I think as a starting point, I'll start with the Senior Citizen Center, that building, and some of the discussion about the operations of it. And we'll hopefully kind of walk through that one and see where we're at for time, knowing that we've got the 6 o'clock meeting ahead of us. And if we can get into some of the other items that are open-ended, we'll certainly do so. The Senior Center building, to bring it back to maybe the elementary level of where we started this discussion at a finance committee level in February of this year. As you all know, we were opening the book on everything and looking at operations and services and if there were any opportunities to increase revenues or look at different revenue generating items, as well as items that we had planned upcoming expenditures and if there are ways to save on those expenditures. We had the item of the HVAC unit at a city council meeting early this year. We had have $120,000 planned in the budget in 2023, which is currently moved ahead into the 2024 budget on the replacement of the heating and cooling system. That large price, the $120,000 price, is largely related to the fact that we operate a commercial kitchen for our Lutheran Social Services Senior Meal Program. If there was not a commercial kitchen operating in that building and we look to replace the HVAC system, we'd probably be looking more at a cost of safely I'd say in the $65,000 to $70,000 area rather than $120,000. And so that was one point of the consideration in discussing what the future of the Senior Center building is as a whole. If we're going to make that kind of large investment in the HVAC system, we should feel all really confident that we know what the long-term plan of the building is. And so as we've talked about and it's been discussed at city council meetings, I want to make, I think, as clear as possible from a staff perspective that as we look at or talk through a potential sale of that building or a list for sale of the building, at a staff level, we have never felt like the discussion about the sale of that building would mean that we don't feel like there needs to be a place for senior programming in our community. We feel really strongly that there is a need for senior citizen programming, and we've had a lot of discussion at the Senior Center board level and at a staff level about where senior center programming may be able to be housed if it wasn't in the current senior center facility. Through the course of this last summer, we had some discussions with Charlotte at the library, with Jeremy stepping into his new role in Parks and Rec, with the Senior Center board and the Senior Center coordinator at that building. We looked at the library as one potential site for some of those programs to be able to move to. I think there's a lot of opportunity at the library in being able to bring new programming and kind of a new spin on what senior programming looks like into the library setting and taking advantage of a lot of the great staff and programming that the library already puts on. Yeah, I think it'd be an opportunity to open up kind of a new realm of what programming looks like for seniors than what we currently see. There are roadblocks or negatives to that idea, though. The primary one at the Senior Center board level, as we talked about it with them, is that the space the library has available would not be able to be dedicated in regular business hours to the senior citizens community. It would be programs would be on a rotating schedule similar to the rest of the library programming is. They'd have a room dedicated for an hour for a specific activity. That program would move out and someone else would move right in behind them in all likelihood. And so that was listed as a concern of the senior centers. They feel really strongly at this time that at the senior center building, they have a space that they know is theirs from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day for whatever services they may want or need. And that's a concern I don't think we can answer if we would look to move all programming to the library. A second site that we looked at, we took the senior center board over to look at was Nash Park, the warming house at Nash Park that right now is used in the winter months for a warming house area for the outdoor rink. Outside of that 3 months of the year, that building largely remains shuttered with the lights off and the doors locked. We have certainly always felt like we have seen that in Parks and Recreation as kind of a wasted opportunity with that building. It's about 2,000 square feet, 2,200 square feet in that area. Really similar in size when you go to the senior center of the main dining area that the senior center can offer. Shaped a little differently. It's a rectangle instead of a square, but it's really similar in size. We did recognize, and I still think we would still recognize that if that was something that was going to be pursued, one, we would need to plan for how in the winter months the warming house area would coexist with senior programming. I think they're oftentimes held at different times of the day. One's a daytime largely activity, one's more of an evening after school activity. So I think they could coexist. We would just need to make sure we understood what that looked like in planning for how the building would look. And second to that, that building we'd all need to recognize would need a lot of renovation to be able to be ready for the senior population. It's not up to date from an ADA standpoint, just even access in and out of the buildings with tow trips and doors and different access, the restrooms and so forth would need a lot. But I believe that there's an opportunity there. The senior center board, when they went, they had a lot of concerns about the space at the Nash Park facility, the parking, and just access with enough parking spaces to be able to accommodate the number of people that would use the facility. And I think really probably as a group, we all have had a hard time envisioning what renovations would look like and what renovations would be enough that it would kind of push it over the top to make it a good home for a permanent senior center programming. So those are the two options that we spent a lot of time on this summer. A third option that's been discussed at a lot less time is the Sunshine Terrace facility in the apartment complex. There is a community room that in a lot of cases serves similar population as the Senior Citizens Center does. Again, that would not be a room that would be able to be, at least as we see it today, be dedicated on a full 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday basis to senior citizen programming, but it could fit in with what's already going on there. They're already in a lot of cases playing cards, they're having coffee, having conversation, playing bingo at times and so forth. So I think there are some similarities there that we could potentially capitalize off of. And then the last one is continue to operate the senior center and as it looks today. And is there a desire to continue to do that? I think from the senior center board's perspective, that would be their desire, is that they feel like that facility provides them the most necessary needs for what they want to see. At a staff level, talking with Charlotte at the library and Jeremy in Park and Rec, I think we all feel strongly that we probably have, I won't even say probably, I believe strongly we do have opportunity to use the senior center building for more than it currently is used for. I think there are probably creative ways we can look at from a revenue perspective to make that facility set up better for outside entities to rent it. There are a number of auxiliary rooms, I will call them, that are smaller spaces that could be set up more efficiently than they are today to transition from one program to another. And in today's setting in the senior center, it's a luxury of the senior center, but every room kind of has its own specific purpose. There's a arts and crafts room, there's a card room, there's a mahjong room, there's a bingo room, there's a room with a pool table in it, there's a room with an elliptical in it. And as you go around, each room kind of has its own use. And if it's not for that scheduled activity at that time, that room might just sit closed with the lights off. And Charlotte has been able to, at the library, as you see the programming she offers and the number of people they serve, those rooms all have a very dynamic flexibility in that they can be set up for one thing at 10 a.m. and by noon it can be transitioned into something else completely. I think if we wanted to take a more broad approach to what the senior center looks like, even from a holistic view of the entire community, still providing a very specific place for senior citizens to have programming and receive services, but maybe open its doors to other pieces and parts of the community that are looking for a home, that may open some doors to some additional revenue that we haven't really considered. And so wrapping that all up in a bow, at this point, I think we're looking for direction on do we want to continue pushing forward with the senior center building as it is? Do we want to task staff with taking a deeper look at what additional programming could look like in the senior center? How is it all staffed? Or do we want to start going the other direction and looking further at a potential sale of the building? And if so, then what does senior programming look like in other parts of our community? All that said, I'm open for any comments or questions or.
I think one of the things, taking a look at this, one of my wishes would be to, I think it's not a short-term, I guess, process. I think other than maybe looking at utilizing our staff from the Park and Rec Department, I'll just come out and say it. I guess ending the director position at the senior center and utilizing the Park and Rec staff and people maybe from the library that could staff, a couple days a week. Maybe there's certain hours during the week they could do it. And then maybe look at enhancing the programs and doing different things there for, 24. And then maybe looking at, well, is this really working for us? Is this something that can work somewhere else in the city, and keep maybe looking at that facet of the senior center being a resilient place for our citizens to go to? I think I would like to have, that discussion of how that would look, how would we do it. And I think that, not stop thinking about what we could do if we maybe put it somewhere else, if that's the way it goes after this next year. So, if I'm Mr. Mayor.
Jump in. We've talked a lot about it. In these meetings, we've talked a lot about it, just brainstorming outside of these meetings, what could work. And I have to agree with Council President Olsted from the standpoint that we are in a very difficult financial time as a city. And next we consider, what are our most essential and maybe some non-essential employees. And then the next question coming out of that is, of those that would be considered non-essential, including police and fire and public works and, the very essential services that we provide, the next question becomes, how would we backfill that? How would we provide those same services to that same group of people? And then what position maybe would we have the easiest time doing that? So just so everybody's clear, that's the kind of mental machinations that we've been going through to try to also honor the preferences of our people, not to see a big tax hike, right? That's really what's driving this whole thing. When we got our statements coming in for next year and got a chance to look at the different shares of tax that are going to be going up a little bit for the coming year, this is what drives that whole effort, is also respecting the wishes of our people not to be taxed into oblivion. So that's really the driving force. It's a tough call. We love every member of our team here, all of our city employees, and yet we're faced with this budget situation that calls for us to do some of these things. And I've talked to a number of our senior citizens. You think the hockey families have some strong feelings and strong opinions of how they want things to go. Those senior citizens in their own way, wait, I guess I'm almost one, but we're still going to say those senior citizens, they like that place. They like the services they get there. They like the opportunity to have their own hangout. I think anywhere else that we would take it, we would take away kind of their clubhouse feel. And so if there's a way to keep that facility, even in the long term, looking at operations and looking at programming, that's what I would support.
Anybody else have any? Mr. Larson?
Yeah, just a question for Reed here. And in addition to what Mr. Olsted said, are we in a position where we can continue to defer the HVAC replacement for one more year to kind of see how things, if there is a change, see how we use the building before we pull the trigger on a large capital investment?
I would say yes. In my opinion, yes, we could defer. There is always the potential of a failure to the current system, but that's not unlike any other facility we own. The heating and cooling there is post flood, so it's 1997, 1998 year at the end of its lifespan. But all of that said, regular maintenance is done annually on it, and it appears at this moment that it's all in good working order. It certainly heats fine. It heats actually very efficiently. The issue was raised from a cooling perspective largely in the summer months with that kitchen operating in a hot building. It doesn't cool nearly to the level that anyone would like it to have it be comfortable. But in the short term, to understand what that could look like in another year or two, I would say yes, we could hold off.
Thank you. That would be my recommendation as well, combined with the change in staffing levels, would be to defer that capital investment until we have another year to really understand what the future of these services are. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
I think, Mr. President, on your comment, then the question would be, is there any additional thought process in, and maybe you're just going to ask for staff to bring back a recommendation, but should the staff consider a recommendation on what programming and services and hours of operation of a building would look like if we're talking about the reallocation of time of other staff?
Yeah, I think you need to maybe take a look at it and see what can be done. You know, I think in the past year we've had staff over there taking care of things already now.
Yep.
I mean, could it be 3 days a week, you know, from 10 to 2, whatever it may be. And then I guess also working with the library and whoever else in the city staff that you could look at, you know, setting up maybe, okay, this is what we're doing.
Yep.
It's Monday or it's Tuesday through Thursday, whatever it may be. And these people are here, and Monday, Friday, these people are here. But what, you know, just maybe look at that.
Yep.
I think getting it down where it's constant.
Okay.
And then if we add things, you know, we can also change it up.
Absolutely.
But,
Okay.
yeah.
I'd ask that you also work with the senior citizen board. They know what their priorities are, what hours they would most want to see it fully operational, maybe some programming that has never been there that they might want to see. So I think they would be a good resource even right at this time also.
Yep. Absolutely. If I could add just maybe one more thing on this discussion and this topic, as I'm just thinking and listening to it, at a finance committee meeting level with staff involved, you'll recall that we looked really closely at the charges for services in a lot of our other recreation programming. We were able to more closely align what future services could cost from a recreation standpoint, a hockey, a figure skating, a baseball, and try to more closely align those to what the cost of the staffing levels were. And I think we've been able to make some ground up in that. I guess to your thoughts, Mr. Olsted, and where this started is, I just would say that out loud that I think at this point, if we looked at a potential reduction in staffing at the senior center, it would allow us to have a better discussion about what services are and how we could tie any potential revenues from rents or from senior center memberships to the true cost of staffing levels. As we looked at a finance level as it stands today, there's such a broad range. We're so far off that it's almost not even worth having this conversation about revenues. So I think that could be tied into it too, to some level. We're not going to completely balance it, but to some level, having those become a little closer together from a staffing cost perspective would make sense in my mind.
I know one way we've looked at that population, A, they pay generous amounts of taxes, and B, operating on fixed income, many of them. And so I think we can keep that in mind even as we go forward. They are paying a good bit of property tax and operating also on a fixed income. So I think that's a good thought to have in our heads as well.
Somebody else have any input, comments?
The next question that I would have, on the agenda on the RCA, the next item I included was charges for services. I don't know that at this time I would think there would be a lot of discussion that I'm comfortable to move forward. I'll just give you the background on why I listed that and what I've learned since last week. I had a discussion with Jason in Public Works about our refuse collection charges for commercial businesses. That's a fee that hasn't been adjusted in quite some time, 10 plus years probably. We are collecting enough to cover our cost in that area right now, but to the mayor's request and to his thought a couple of weeks ago, one that has been left stagnant. And so I don't think I'm ready at this point to move forward any recommendation for increase in those fees, but it would be one, I think, looking ahead to next year that would be a good for us to have more consideration on. And as we look at 2025's budget, I think we could bring more discussion for that. So if you're all okay with it, that piece of it I would hold off on for tonight. The third item was the city staffing levels, total cost of wages. We've talked a little bit about that already. I have had a couple of council members just personally come to have the discussion about if there were any other positions in the city that we could consider for any type of early retirement plans or early separations. The quick answer to that is I think there are other positions that could be considered. The harder point to that question would be, is there truly any cost savings to it? Most of the positions that we would probably look to based on their years of service with the city or how near potential retirement age they are would be positions that we would look at backfilling with a hiring process to fill. And so it does start to close the door on what potential savings there may be in the long run. But certainly, I think there are, as the mayor described, those types of non-essential positions, non-union positions that there may be a little bit of wiggle room on. There could still be others that some of you are thinking of. And then certainly the discussion about the current open positions the city has. There's an opening in Public Works, and there's an opening in our admin office in that accounting position. From the Public Works perspective, they are looking at some potential movement within some of the job descriptions that they think could allow that position, at least one position there, to remain open. I would expect, hopefully as quick as next week's work session, that we could have some more detailed discussion and look at what that might look like. And the accounting position, that position I would maintain that I feel like it does, in the long haul, we do need to consider how to fill that position. I understand in the short-term budget implications we have and where we're at, that may be difficult for us to do. We had a good discussion last week with city staff about how to potentially reorganize or reassign some of the tasks that are being left open by that accounting technician being vacant. And what I would say is that in a short-term window, we talked about in the next 6 months through June of 2025 as a time frame to how to reallocate some of those duties to sort of get by. I think there's potential that we can do that, but I think short of completely reorganizing certain employees' job duties to cover that vacancy in the long run, I really still feel strongly that that's a position that we're going to need to figure out how to get filled.
To your point, Reed, I think you and I have discussed this privately also, and that is our city employees are not interchangeable parts, and that position, particularly the finance position that's currently unfilled, that's a very unique skill set that's not found in every one of our people.
Correct.
So nobody could, the vast majority of folks couldn't just slide over and be counted upon, even with intensive training to fulfill that. That is a very unique set of skills and aptitude. And so I like the idea, if there is an open position in a time of a tight budget, to consider, is there a way to not hire for that, and yet if we decide that no one in-house is is able to move over there, has the skill or has the time, then we're going to have to take a look at filling that one before we burn out the other ones who've picked up those tasks, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Larson.
Back to your comment on the Public Works opening, looking at the schedule here for the rest of the year, it feels like we're getting really tight. Are we in a position to discuss that next week and then get that, if that is something that we can vote on, do we have time to make that happen here before the end of the year?
Yeah, I believe we do. I believe we do. That is, I'm questioning with the updates to job descriptions, the civil service rules require that the Civil Service Commission approve any updates to the job descriptions. That's what I'm questioning in the timeline. But I think due to the sensitivity and the timeliness of this answer and the implication it has to the budget, I guess I would feel that we would bring it to the city council for discussion next week at the work session. And then if the civil service approvals need to come kind of subsequently after that, that's kind of approving the language and the terminology and the job description itself, not necessarily the how it's structured. So that piece of it may hold that up a little, but I think we could get there.
Okay, thank you.
And just to maybe add to that one further, the potential savings that we think we have and we're looking at, that's been included in the discussion in the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking for other input? Is that what you're looking for, Mr. Hutton?
Yeah, well, it's all great input. Then I guess just because we have the time for the discussion, and some of it is information that Ms. Anderson is going to present at the Truth and Taxation meeting tonight. But to continue the discussion from last week, with the items I showed last week at items for consideration that could help to balance the budget, we ended up at basically an additional shortfall of $150,000. And some of the discussion tonight can certainly help that, but it won't make up all 150,000. So a couple of other items that I would be open for any feedback or direction on would be going back to the year-end fund balance in our reserves. At the discussion we had when we started 2 weeks ago, Ms. Anderson presented an estimated fund balance at a 5% budget of 44%. There are a few items that we didn't and hadn't accounted for in looking at what that total fund balance would be. Items that we know we won't spend this year that are ongoing. One being there's been a bunch of movement within city positions in 2023. Of course, we haven't had the accounting technician filled since April. The city administrator leaving and then my moving into the city administrator had some salary savings. The same for my leaving the Park and Rec position, and the new Park and Rec created some salary savings. So all in total between those three job moves, and even the Public Works Supervisor being open, there's somewhere in the area of $75,000 in savings in 2023 that would move into the budget into the reserves for next year. Another piece of it that's in our fund balance today that we hadn't planned for is the school district for the lease of the Civic Center. They paid this spring of 2023, they paid their lease due for the 2022 to 2023 ice season. And now they paid the 2023-2024 ice season this fall. So that is funds that today show our fund balance to be $110,000 higher than anticipated. And they will now stay on a schedule where they're going to pay us every fall for the coming season. So we will again receive another payment in 2024 for the 24-25 season. So now our fund balance is a little ahead on that end of it. So this all begs the question, when Ms. Anderson presents at the Truth and Taxation meeting tonight, she's going to show that we would have an estimated fund balance of 48% rather than 44%. And on that $150,000 remaining deficit. Is there any consideration for any additional fund balance to be planned for? That's question one. Or question two is, we've all set in mind a goal of 5% increase. Is there any consideration for an additional percent to 6% to get us a little closer to even? Those are just, I think, outstanding questions that would help us be able to move forward ahead of next week.
Can you clarify for me? Are you saying right now there's a negative 150 balance?
So, yeah, that's what, based off of what I walked through last week, I'm showing that would be, if we could include the cost of the revenue of the SRO, if we got that back in, we leave a public works position open, and then we use the Fund 681 transfer that we transferred to the general fund. If we would use all 73,000 of that for 2024, that would leave us at a shortfall of $150,000, 140 to 150.
Does this include our tonight's conversation of the senior center?
It does not.
Okay.
So that would be in addition to that. Yeah, so that's 120, but not a general fund expenditure. That comes out of the building maintenance fund. Yeah.
But the operational side would show up.
So right now, we're at a negative 150 and roughly 66,000's a percent. So you're looking at 2.5%, well, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And that'd be, so if you're looking at it, so that's 7.5% tax levy roughly. And, you know, I think I've mentioned it and I said it before, I know the state has guidelines of the 35% to 50%. And I don't want to keep going back to something that we can take money out of that is not a solution. It's not a long-term solution. It doesn't, help us going forward. I think, one of the things, and I'll bring it up, one of the things that we talked about is looking at other staff too. And it's not staff that we would get rid of and we wouldn't have something. It would be, I guess, reorganization. And, we've talked about it is, an opportunity for us to go look at this year coming up of maybe reorganizing the economic development group and looking at still having a director. So I don't want them calling me and saying, well, you're going to get rid of it. We're not doing it. That's not our thought process. And looking at how we would, along with looking at how we're going to do the accounting technician or surviving that, we would also look at how we would maybe move around staff that we could have in EDA still, but also have it look differently. I know there's, articles of incorporation and bylaws that we have to follow because of the EDA. I get it. And that would have to be a long haul fix if we wanted to look at that. But it's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing to have a director, but have it look differently, how it's set up, how it maybe intertwines with the rest of the city staff. So I think that has to be looked at also. I said, I'd have a tough time going into the reserves because, again, it's not a long-term fix. It's a short-term fix, and we come around 12 months later, we're still talking about it. Okay, well, now we can go into it again. Well, if we keep doing that, we're going to be down to under 40%, and I don't feel comfortable. So I think, from my standpoint, looking at that and seeing how that would be structured, I think it's something we need to look at and have discussions with the EDA board, involving them, involving, the council, the mayor. I mean, just everybody that's, and even having discussions, involving Mr. Gordy and going from there. It's something that we need to look at. I know that, it's not something that's going to be done by January 1, but I think if we work toward it and walk toward that and figure it out, not make a quick movement judgment, we need to make sure it's set up correctly and run correctly, because it's a very important area that we have for the city. So, with that. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, just to recap the earlier conversation, if the staffing changes if that's finalized at the senior center, that's about 100,000 in savings, approximately?
Yeah, the cost of the senior center position annually is about 100,000.
Okay.
It wouldn't be that in savings in immediate in year one, but over time, there would be that kind of savings on an annual basis.
Understood, and there'd be some additional staff to cover or some additional responsibilities that could impact salaries, I get that, but maybe that's a pretty good percentage of that 150 that we've already talked through. So,
Yep.
okay, that's helpful, thank you.
And to your point, Mr. Larson, I totally understand that, but we're looking at numbers that we're pushing forward from this year to next year that we're actually going to use probably in the next few years on stuff. And
I get it.
I think still looking at taking stuff out of the reserves,
Yeah.
it doesn't sit well with me. I know over the since I got on council, we worked hard to get it back up to there because of the negative 1% tax levy. So I just have I want to make sure that we're taking care of the city up there. We need to make sure that we're having that reserves just in case something does need to be done. We have the capability of going to it in an emergency, and I think that's what we need to do. But
And I wonder if in the moment, Mr. Larson, the point that you were making is that is a genuine savings. That is not just kicking the can down the road. When you're making kind of structural changes in how you provide services that find savings, that's a genuine savings. I think that's kind of.
I think maybe you misunderstood me.
Yeah.
It's from getting to that 150 with some of those taken out.
Yeah.
And I understand the 100,000 or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. I totally get that.
So we
It's
should
the
find
thing
some
how
more
we're getting to that
Yeah.
150.
Yeah. We should find some more savings also,
right.
I think.
Yeah, I would, and I probably didn't finish my thought there. I wasn't referring that we would find those savings in the reserves.
Right.
I would be in favor of a higher tax levy than pulling from the reserves, just to be honest. We can't keep doing that. We've done that every year I've been on the council to just fill the hole in the boat, and that's just not a good practice long term. So, but yeah, I was just kind of wondering where we sat after today's conversation. So.
No, I get it. Totally understand it. You did that.
Yeah, we're good. I think we were all on the same page, but I wanted to make sure in the conversation that that's where we settled.
We're still holding hands in a second. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Parchivinsky.
No,
Thank you,
that's a
Mr.
good
President. Reed, if we defer filling the accounting tech position until, say, June, that's additional savings, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What does that number end up being?
The annual cost of that position is about $86,000.
And that's in the budget right now?
That's currently in the budget.
That position's in the
Correct.
budget? Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else have any input, discussions?
If I could, and I know we've had this conversation, but I'm going to come back to it one more time. And that is, and Reed, if you want to come in alongside on this conversation, we have expenses in a variety of categories. We have operational costs, we have assets that we're purchasing, and those are paid for through a capital improvement fund and a variety of sources, and many of them are just paid in our general operations. And on the revenue side, we have all these categories of revenue. And some of those revenue categories have not changed much at all. Some of them, for example, we know that LGA is outside of our control, and we can't really influence that a great deal. But what happens when we have even a reasonable increase in our staff wages, from one year to the next, if it would go up by 3 or 4%, or even 5% in an inflationary year, then when we have to try to cover that from a small subset of our revenue, that being the monies that we levy in property taxes, to cover a 4 or 5% increase over here, which is appropriate, we pay probably 10 or 15% over here on the tax levy because of the other categories of revenue that are not going up. And we need to pay attention to that, because we can't overload the taxpayers in just that subset against a reasonable increase in wages, right? So we have to make sure, to the extent that we can, that these appropriate streams of revenue, whether it's a franchise fee, whatever it may be, that those are tracking with inflation so that we don't overload the one subset, which is property tax. That is, again, my challenge. Not for this year, not for 2024, but in the out years, we need to pay attention to that mathematical quirk, because otherwise property tax levy is going to keep going crazy, even to cover an appropriate increase in wages to our people. If anyone else says anything, I know, yeah, Claire's going to counter that, and you go for it.
I'm not even going to touch on that one, man. I'm wondering, we've talked about a number of positions already that we're either going to not fill or leave open. I'm wondering, or I would challenge our staff to, if council's not willing to go from 5 to 7.5%, if council's not willing to spend out of reserves, give us a third option of, we could eliminate this position or that position or that position, you know, an a la carte type scenario where we've identified these positions within the city that we really don't want to lose them, but we could lose them if we needed to balance the budget type thing.
I know there's a concern that is, if we cast a broad net and hint that, well, these are 20 that maybe could go, and now the council can rank and prioritize that. That kind of ripples out through our team. It's a bit unsettling. And I know there's that. I mean, there's that whole dynamic of, you know, the goodwill and the morale, kind of keeping an eye on that.
And I understand that, but we're talking 150,000, so it's probably 2 positions within the city that we'd have to eliminate and make that up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I understand and hear the point, Mr. Vetter. The concern I would have with it is the request for staff to make the recommendation to council. I think that puts department heads in a really difficult and peculiar place to pit, so to speak, pit departments against each other. We've got a group that works really well together, and I think through this finance committee process has been really open-minded to offering discussions that they see as departments. But I would really hesitate to how to ask them to start to weigh the priorities of their department against the priorities of other departments. And it feels to a degree that that's what it would become. So if that was the request, I think I would rather provide way more information than asking for, and I can provide you the total cost of all the jobs in the city, and the city council can look at that and make a decision that it feels best based on how it wants to see the city operated and the services the city would provide, rather than the city department heads and staff bringing a couple of positions forward.
Anybody else have anything? Mr. Helms?
What would happen if we got rid of the infield building like we've been talking about doing for a long time? What would that do for us? I mean, that's one that,
So for my 2 cents, I would want to use those proceeds for a non-recurring expense, not operating our city. You know, maybe it goes toward our share of LaFave Park project, or maybe our share of the arena baseball complex. You know, the one-time, one-off kind of expenditures versus, because to your point, then next year when we don't have that revenue source, how do we plug the hole then? So I love the thought of it. I'm ready for us to do that. And I would love to see those proceeds go to our share of some infrastructure cost that's kind of a non-recurring expense.
maybe if we're hurting that bad, maybe we shouldn't even be looking at doing LaFave Park and a baseball field and everything, if we got it, because that's going to take money out of the pot to do that.
You have other funds, right?
Maybe we shouldn't be looking at spending that money there and using that to, you know.
We do have
We might
other
have to do that down the road. We might have to say, no, we can't do this anymore for a while. We might have to take a break here for 3 or 4 years before we do any more of that kind of stuff and take care of our infrastructure and things like that.
We're good. I mean, we have all funds set up for infrastructure. We have state aid maintenance funds. We have funds allocated for all of this stuff. Nothing's being neglected. And Carla, if you could come and talk to us one more time about source of our local share for LaFave Park. What are the source of those funds? Sorry, Mark.
Thank you. President and Council, part of the part, we've been working on the LaFave Park and the match. Part of it, we've looked at the street is being redone. And when we decided to do that, the reason behind was that normally when you do a street, it comes out of our reconstruction funds or even some assessments. And that whole street is owned by the city. And it does need repairs. Since it was part of the total project, the grant would pay for part of that street. So we threw it in with the grant, knowing that then we'd only have to pay for the match instead of all of it. And so that part of the match is coming out of our street reconstruction fund. So anything tied with the street cost the match is coming out of the reconstruction fund. There is some sanitary sewer fixes, and that match will come out of the sanitary sewer fund or stormwater fund, whichever it will be. And then the other funds, we are looking at using our sales tax leftover dollars to cover that match. So that project is ready to go, and the funding has been accounted for.
And none of it comes out of general fund?
Correct.
Yep.
And you know, the other thing we also have to look at is that this is an investment to improve our community, to improve our tourism, which brings more people in, more business to our businesses, and that's what we looked at when we were doing it. And it's also an area that very, needs to be cleaned up. It's a showpiece, you drive by it every day, and so when Reed actually applied for this grant, that was the reason behind that. And so we do have funds accounted for it. It will be a beautiful project when we're done. It'll be actually a showcase like our trail system.
Good thought, though. If we could have some way, offset this current situation with a look at that, but that's completely outside of the general fund.
And that's a difficulty when we're looking at budgets, not only for you and the public, is that there are separate funds to do separate things. And it's not creative accounting, it's just those are the rules between this account, those are the rules in this account. And we're fortunate that we have some of those accounts so we can get things done without putting the burden on the taxpayer in our general fund. And we do look at that first. We always look at, is there other funding to do this? With street projects, if there's a street project that we're looking at doing and there's a water, replacement there, we try to run the water replacement at the same time so that we can pick up some of those costs in the water fund, same with the stormwater and the sewer, instead of putting the burden all onto the fix of the street, which may also be taxpayers.
All right, does anybody else have anything? Mr. Larson.
Yeah, we got 12 minutes left or so I think we should try and use it our best here. And I'll try and kind of walk a line between Mr. Vetter and Mr. Hutton. And Mr. Stordahl, if you'll join us, I've got a question for you. I'd like to discuss the impacts to public works of eliminating a truck driver position. I'd like to hear your opinions on the impacts on services that you provide if you were down one.
Truck driver position, if we're down one, would mean slower snow cleanup in the wintertime, I guess, of the, we pull different streets throughout the town, we pull downtown. One truck driver out of that position would slow that process down. It would also, one of the big things, like in a flood year, we use all staff for flood walls, and in building that, and one person might not seem like a lot, but it's quite a bit on a flood wall when you need that one person. So those are probably two of the biggest things, but it would slow down day-to-day stuff. Right now I would say we're at a staff shortage. We're one short, not only with the supervisory position, but we lost a truck driver as well a couple of years ago. We tried to hire that position back temporarily in the wintertime, and there was union issues with it, so we ended up losing the temp position as well. So right now it'd be, I guess, timeliness. When that truck driver isn't hauling snow, they might be in a loader clearing one end of town. So that slows the process down as well. When we do all the cul-de-sacs, we do the area by Hugo's and out in the industrial park with the loaders. So if a truck driver's in that position, now that spot doesn't get done. And it actually would impact us quite a bit. And we're at a point right now, if anybody's out for, sickness or vacation or something like that, and we get a bunch of snowfalls, it's a big deal as far as our timeliness and getting stuff done. And then there's the summertime stuff as well. We have daily pickups that extra truck driver's doing for residences that are scheduled. That person might be in a mower mowing the levees as we have other stuff going on. That person might be filling in for on a weekend with a parade or something like that. And then we get to our spring and fall cleanup times too, and one truck driver down, that's a lot of material that's hauled from that one truck driver. And they don't only haul the material, but they're in and out of the trucks picking up material, so them extra set of hands when they're doing that. So it would be, we can do anything. It would just slow a lot of stuff down. And in that case, then you'd be looking at more overtime to clean up those things and overtime for snow removal stuff. And so in the end, how much would we be saving? I don't know. So,
Could you clarify your opening statement there? Is there an open truck driver position now that's budgeted for next year?
No.
Or that's not?
I guess I don't foresee it ever being refilled now. We kind of lost it when we lost it, and maybe in hindsight I should have pushed for it being filled at that time, but we thought it would work out with having a temporary in the wintertime, but that wasn't allowed, so here we are. So we're just kind of making do with it. But no, we would not intend to have it filled.
How long ago was that, Jason, that we went down that one in number?
Probably 8-9 years ago, something like that.
You'll probably see idle time with the loaders and during snow removal and cleanup time. We've got, say, two trucks going, we lose one truck, right? The one truck has to go dump, and then while that's happening,
Yes.
the loader just sits there, right?
Right.
And we just pay wages on it.
Anybody else have anything?
That was helpful. Thank you.
Got enough direction, Mr. Hutton?
Yep, thank you very much. Appreciate all the good discussion.
Okay. Nobody else has anything? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Vetter. Second by Punchbinsky. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned. We'll meet upstairs.